Okay, let's do this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi guys, and welcome to Piano and Keyboard Artist, where we discuss the artists related to pianos, keyboards, and synthesizers. And today we're going to do a little bit of a fanboy off-the-cuff chat. And for that, I've got three interesting guests. So my first guest is, you'll know him as a moderator from the Vaughn George Facebook group, and you've also seen him when I go onto the road to interview people. He comes along as my wingman. It's Mr. Lloyd Edward Day. Lloyd, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yep, pretty good. Well, where are you at home today?
Yes, I'm I'm on my day off in my room. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so Lloyd was having a little bit of camera trouble there. He was kind of completely he looked like a ghost, or he looked like he had a big condom over his head or something. It's not perfect now, but we can see you now. But we'll have to sort your camera out at some point, Lloyd. But yeah. I'm glad we can hear you and see you. Right, the next two guests are, they kind of go together, should we say, Ant and Dec, or Salt and Pepper, or Simon and Garfunkel. Or the reason I say Ant and Dec, and please forgive me, is because these two guys are always together. When you see a photo, they're always together. The first time I met them was last year when they introduced me to Rusty Egan. And that was a night and an interview to remember. We went out for some drinks and some pizza. Really top blokes, and they run the Electronic Cafe YouTube channel, which has just come out pretty recently. A very content-rich channel, which I like to watch. These guys have long videos, but it's really content-rich, and you learn a lot. So I'm pleased to welcome, starting off with Mr. Andy McNabb from the Electronic Cafe. Andy, how are you, sir?
Hey, Vaughn. Yeah, I'm very good, mate. Good to be here. Looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for the very kind introduction. Looking forward to it.
That's fine. And as I say, you can send that tenner via PayPal at the end of the.
It's already on its way, mate. It's already on its way.
The rates are going up. Right. Also from the Electronic Cafe, Mr. Mark Woobrow. Mark, how are you, sir?
I'm very good. You got out of that intro quite well, Vaughn. You was going down a route there with the Ant and Dec thing, and then you kind of got out of it.
I know. Back, so. And it's quite difficult, because I've realized now with these live chats, I'm kind of like, Vaughn, this is live, you can't push stop. But anyway, you know what I mean. I think
there's a compliment in there somewhere. I know there was.
Yeah. I wrote a song once called Intentions, and the lyric is, though I did you so wrong, I'm sure that you will agree my intentions were good.
Exactly. But very pleased to be here. Lloyd, Andy, everyone, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Appreciate it.
Right, guys. So let's just do a bit of housekeeping first of all. So when did we meet? It was we did the interview in Holborn with Rusty Egan. Was it last year?
Yeah,
November last year.
Yeah, it was.
I think, yeah.
And I think we were in that room for about 4 hours. The actual interview. I think you managed to get about 3 questions, if I remember right. Rusty is quite a tour de force, isn't he?
Yeah, I always give advice for Rusty, to interview Rusty. I mean, he's larger than life. He's a wealth of knowledge. He knows such a lot, but
Yes.
You've got to get your questions in quickly, and you've got to have a lot of battery power on your cameras.
Yeah. We did an interview with him just earlier in the year. And similar thing, but you do learn so much. You say he's a wealth of knowledge, but I did manage to get 5 questions, and there's supposed to be 1-word answers. I think it's amazing he did until we got to the 9th one, which ended up being about a 20-minute answer. But it was just great to spend some time with him, because
I think we was quite lucky in so much we was just focusing on visage, so we could narrow him in a bit. But I think I said to Vaughn before the interview. Yeah, you've got to kind of try and keep it on topic, because Rusty knows everything, knows everyone. He's been there, done it all. He's a massive, he's a whirlwind, and we was able to try and focus it on visage. But with you, he touched on his early career, his skids, his Ultravox, his visage, his everything. So I mean, that could have gone on for a lot longer as well. It's interesting to listen to, though.
Oh,
really
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He must have known about my channel and the off-topic chicken and all the randomly. He was perfectly in the right place. But no, that was a great interview, and thank you for setting that up, guys. That was really it helped my channel a lot, so I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome, mate. You're welcome.
Right, and it's time for a bit of payback now. So anyone who has not heard of the Electronic Cafe, they've also got a Facebook group. Just like Vaughn George YouTube channel, I started a Facebook group, and the Facebook group acts as kind of like a forum page where we can discuss the videos on the Vaughn George YouTube channel. And I see that, I'm happy to see that the Electronic Cafe have got a similar formula where they release their videos and they use the Facebook group as kind of like a forum setting to discuss the videos. Is that what you had in mind as well, guys?
Yeah,
it is. I mean, you know, me and Andy have been spoken about a YouTube channel before, and then we discovered your one, loved what you were doing, loved your content, and it was probably unique in as much as channels on YouTube. So that kind of gave us the little nudge that we needed to actually do what we wanted to do. Yours, it seems very much more, you know, keyboard and Depeche Mode, whereas like we're just kind of, you know, electronic music. But like you with your Facebook group, it's kind of a good advert or flag for the YouTube channel where you can just put the stuff on that immediately and it can just drive people to the YouTube. Well, that's the plan anyway. I mean, you know, we're under no illusion that you're 10 times bigger than us and, you know, we're just doing our thing. But I mean, you know, your business model, as it were, seems to work amazingly, and it just made sense to do the Facebook thing to support it.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm just really winging it, but I think like with a lot of these things, you start something and then you don't know where it'll take you. You've just got to follow the signals, and then 2 years down the line, you go, "Oh my God, how did that happen?" But when I started my channel, obviously, people were saying, "Vaughn, could you start a forum?" And they recommended Reddit and things like that, because beneath the videos in the comments sections, it's very difficult to start a discussion going. So I figured the best way to do it is to start a Facebook group, because, you know, most people who have computers have Facebook, and that just seemed like the logical step to do. So
yeah, I think just going a bit further back, a lot of this started, I was just out for breakfast with a client hall. And, you know, Mark will tell you, Mark's very similar. I'm very passionate like you about music. And I was just chatting to this guy and he went, "Can I just stop you a minute?" I went, "Yeah." He went, "Look, with your knowledge and your passion, you need to do something with this and start a YouTube channel." So most people, you're right, will do a Facebook page first, then build the YouTube. We can't reverse that. But this guy just said, "You know, this is what you're doing." I said to Mark, "I've got this idea." And Mark was like, "Yeah, love it, let's do it." And Mark is a lifelong friend, you know, my best friend. We've been in bands together, we've written music together. Just seems to make sense, which is probably why you see us together all the time. We are like Ant and Dec, I guess, but you know, it's nice to do it with someone you trust is on the same wavelength. But we've actually got, although we're very similar in that, there are quite a lot of diversions. Like me and Mark were putting our top 30 albums together for the last show of the year, and we're going to release that at some point when we get it filmed. But actually, it was quite, although there were some tracks we liked, there was quite a slant, although the genre was very similar. There was bands on his list, I was like, wow, didn't think they were going there, and he probably thought the same about me. So it's quite a nice range of stuff we're bringing to the party combined. And it seems to be working great, you know, and it's great to work with people like you and, you know, who are on the same wavelength, even though you're doing something slightly different. Like the passion, you can see it. I mean, even that little chat you did for us about Violator, it just made me go, that's exactly why we love music, right? It was brilliant to see. And that's why we did it. And the Facebook thing is just to share the music. The whole reason we did this is just share music, because there's no real platforms apart from shows like yours or ours. You know, when we and Mark were growing up, you had Top of the Pops, the Tube, Old Grey Whistle Test. There was tons of platforms where we'd see Tears for Fears, Simple Minds, all these bands. There is, apart from the Jules Holland show, really, there's nothing out there. So, you know, we're kind of, you know, we're not a TV broadcaster. We're trying to get some support to show there are some amazing bands out there that need some airtime, and that's kind of what we're trying to do.
I must be honest, because a lot of people always ask me, you know, "Oh, Vaughn, can you talk about this? Can you talk about that?" And very often they mention bands that I've never heard of, you know. I mean, and you know, I have knowledge, and I believe I'm good at what I do, but I do not profess to be a knowledge or a sort of like a leading authority on sort of music history and stuff. And this is where I think you guys come in nicely, is because when I've watched your most of your episodes, I admit I haven't watched them all. I have flicked through all of them, but I haven't watched them all in detail. I have most. But I like the fact that you introduce artists that I've never heard of before. So it's very content rich, and yeah, it's very informative, but at the same time, it's not sort of like in 1954, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of, and also you guys have kind of got that conversation kind of thing, because that's very important to my group. I mean, I don't know why I started the channel. I just started it. And, very often when I film, I just start filming. There's not much production done. It's really tough. And I think you guys do probably a bit more pre-production, but your delivery style is very casual and conversational, and I think that is what people want.
Thank you, mate.
Well, I mean, a lot of that's copied from your style, Vaughn, because people want to just be spoken to rather than lectured.
Correct.
And the idea, when we and Andy started, the idea was going to be we sit next to each other on a sofa and we discuss it. But then we went straight into lockdown, and apart from the first episode, we've been forced to do everything apart. So the format that's developed has kind of been out of the situation rather than what we originally set out to do. Mm-hmm. But I mean, going back to what you do and knowing how much work we put into our one episode every 2 weeks, the content you put out, I just don't know how you got the time to do it all, to be fair.
Oh, well, I as Bon Jovi said, I'll sleep when I'm dead. My fiance does worry about me sometimes, I'll be honest. It's just like I'll come to bed like long after her and I'll be awake long before her. But I've always been a very energetic kind of person. I don't need much sleep. I've always been very, alive in that way. It's just, I've recently had this thing that's hit me. It's kind of like a dizziness thing, I'm thinking it might be a COVID related thing. So, and it has really, I am struggling a bit. I mean, the way you're looking at me now, I probably look the same, but things are a bit wobbly. It's getting better, but it's a challenge.
Well, didn't know that, but I hope you feel better, buddy.
No, that's fine. Right.
Yeah,
there'll be a link coming up now for donations. Okay, guys, let's jump into, as I said, there's no real sort of subject to this video. I just really wanted to, make a sort of like an official video with the Electronic Cafe, and to get Lloyd on as well, to represent the Vaughn George Facebook group. Let's start off with Lloyd. Lloyd, why electronic music? When was the first time you kind of got into electronic music?
So my dad was from that kind of, he kind of grew up with that period of craft work. He introduced me to like Human League as well. It was a lot of, and from that it kind of developed into Depeche Mode, Tears for Fears, and Ultravox. And ever since then I've been hooked. So yeah, I would say it mostly stemmed from my dad, really. It would be the honest answer.
You're making me feel old, Lloyd.
Sorry?
You're making me feel old because your dad can.
Wow.
Well, we'll get on to ask you the same question, Mark. But before we do that, I was doing a live Zoom Q&A the other day with David Brooks, Gary Newman's keyboard player. And that went really well. But I was kind of like, really, what's the word, like, wowed. There was a 10-year-old kid on there that came onto the Zoom chat to ask questions. So I naturally assumed this 10-year-old kid got into Gary Newman because of their parents. But no, just went, no, I'm just here. I found it myself and I love it, at 10 years old. So it's good to see when the younger generation have such good taste. Yeah. So Mark, the same question to you. How did you get into electronic music and made you so passionate about it?
Well, I mean, electronic music, there's so much stuff that comes under the umbrella of electronic music. I mean, whether it's like, the 80s stuff, or there's a lot of great modern day stuff. you know, there's some early 70s stuff, which were kind of like the pioneer people with electronic music. So when people like electronic music, there's a lot of different aspects to it. But for me, I remember being 15 years old, being massively into Adam and the Ants at the time, and like the flamboyance of all, like, you know, Adam and the Ants. And then 1980 came along, the new romantic sort of thing came on, and it's the dressing up and all the kind of first wave of Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet, and, you know, hearing Our Friends Electric or Enola Gay or Electricity from OMD, and just knowing that that was like totally different to anything else in the charts. And it just really kind of drove me to, I mean, from that moment, that was my kind of epiphany moment. And like hearing those songs for the first time, and I mean, you love your music, you know what it's like. Sometimes you hear a song, you just think, wow. And then you just got to play it again, and you play it again and play it again. These songs come up few and far between, but it just seems like when I was 15, turning 16, 1980, there was a lot of those songs that came up, you know, Tainted Love, Soft Cell, or Our Friends Electric, or like Enola Gay, or Planet Earth, or Cut a Long Story Short, or, yeah, there were so many great songs of these artists coming through. And I just thought, you know, this is the genre for me. And I became a little bit snobby about it, to be fair, because when I was that age, I kind of dismissed everything that didn't have a synthesizer in it. And like only like being older, and you go back and go, oh, do you know what? The Police were like a really good band, or
Yeah.
the Smiths were a really good band. And that was kind of like at the same time, but I was like too much into Visage, Ultravox and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it was just a genre of music that I just thought, this is great. And it made me want to buy a synthesizer, which I eventually did.
Yeah, you and Andy had a band together, didn't you?
We've had a few bands together, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Andy, same question to you, mate. What was your first introduction to electronic music that made you love synthesizers?
So a bit before Mark and Lloyd, mate, I was about 14, and I actually literally my dad had an old Triumph Dolomite estate, and he put the radio on, and I just heard this, the farm, or the auto farm. I'm like, what the is this? Never heard anything like it, as most people hadn't. And I just fell in love with that sound. And, you know, I was only a kid, so I didn't think about buying around, but that actual sound. Then about a year later, I Feel Love came out with Donna Summer, with Georgie Moroder. And then I heard the guitar riff from Heroes of Bowie. And then there was certain moments in my childhood where I just sat up and took notice. And then the other one was in my house in Romford, Top of the Pops. Family used to get around the sofa at 7:30 on a Thursday night, and there he was, Gary Newman, Our Friends Electric, straight in at number one. Never seen him. And even my dad went, who's this guy? He's really cool. I was like, is he cool? Next thing I knew, I'm at the Hammersmith Odeon watching two guys, one on a bass, one on a synth with a rhythm track called Winston, the support band, OMD, thinking these guys are great. And then Newman comes on with all these light towers. And this is like 1979, right? So it's like way ahead of its time. Mm. And that was it for me. I was just like, and you know, I've got a pretty eclectic taste. I mean, as a kid, I grew up on Deep Purple, Zeppelin, all that kind of stuff, and early Bowie. But then it all kind of, and I still appreciate all kinds of music. You know, and even now, some of the new funk, soul, electronic stuff. There's a band called Salt that I've been pushing quite hard. That are amazing. They've done 4 albums in 16 months. You know, so I've got quite eclectic taste. But that post-punk sort of Joy Division, Tears for Fears, Simple Minds is so ingrained in my soul.
Japan, early Japan.
Japan. I mean, there's certain back Talk, obviously. I could go on. Depeche Mode, clearly. And you know, Newman's been my kind of guilty pleasure in my life. I've probably seen him and Depeche Mode live more than any other artist. I think probably Depeche Mode I've seen 20 or 30 times, and Newman, similar, me and Mark have beaten most of those together. So yeah.
Here's a funny story. This is how much Andy liked Gary Newman. Okay, do you remember when Newman, the telecom look with the boiler suit with the the belts going down and the belts going across? Andy turned up to school dressed in a boiler suit with the belts and that going across him.
I can't picture it.
He got sent home very quickly. Anything to get off school, mate. Yeah, and I used to run the gauntlet. I used to live about 1.5 miles from the Romford station, and Romford, everyone was going to kill me there, but they didn't really get this whole new romantic thing, and I was literally beaten, kicked before I got to the train, and then finally arrived in Soho where I could be with all these like-minded new romantics. It was an amazing time, and that was the best period of my life in terms of music, clothes, culture, everything was just incredible. And there's still people, young kids bringing new stuff on, which is what we like to tell people about on the Electronic Cafe, but it's just not getting the platform that these other bands had 30, 40 years ago, unfortunately.
Well, that was really a fascinating period. A lot of people sometimes think my channel is an 80s channel because we're, and if you've just come onto the channel, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's a Depeche Mode channel, or there are other subjects. But I am sort of going to, digress eventually, because I was saying to Lloyd, I'm a little bit Depeche Moded out at the moment because I get like tons of inboxes. And the other day, my fiance, she said to me, she said, "Oh, aren't you sick of Depeche Mode?" And I went, I am actually, but not in a bad way, because it's just kind of like, if I was an actor, I'd be so typecast. It's like, oh, it's the Depeche Mode guy. I was at the Synth Fest. When I was at Synth Fest, I was helping Tom Carpenter and Tom J. Carpenter and Simon Forsyth at the Analog Solutions station, where the synthesizer station. And I was sitting there, and this guy came and went, "It's the Depeche Mode dude from YouTube." I was like, "Oh God," And I was thinking, oh, Phil Oakey's over there. Why don't you go talk to him rather, kind of thing. But that period was very fascinating, and I can interesting what you said there, Mark. That's
hang on, Vaughn. Hang on. What was your epiphany moment? How did you? What was yours?
Well, I said I wasn't like a real huge music fan. I used to kind of like it, but I was more of a geek. I was more into like helicopters and aeroplanes and model planes. So when I heard "Enjoy the Silence" for the first time, that's what got me into music. And I'd always known the name Depeche Mode because, back in school in those days, everyone would have on their pencil cases that have written Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, AC/DC. So I'd seen the word Depeche Mode flagged up. And when I heard "Enjoy the Silence" for the first time, I got into it quite late, but that's what led me to where I am now.
Sure.
And that's what led me to the electronic music. And then I went into Jean-Michel Jarre and Jealous. And so I've got a very broad taste in music. You wouldn't think that if you looked at my channel, because it's just Depeche Mode all
Depeche Mode guy.
Yeah, but
Depeche Mode guy.
The Depeche Mode guy. And of course, and then we go deeper down the rabbit hole because we're going to bring Gareth Jones onto a chat. I hope you guys can make it onto that. And of course, but then that just reinforces the whole Depeche Mode thing again as well. And anyway.
Sorry, Vaughn, I interrupted you, but
no, it's all good.
I just wanted to know.
No, it's all, this is a conversation, so yeah, go for it. One thing you guys are going to laugh at me now is that I've always been fascinated by dance music, sort of like the 90s period. I don't really like dance music these days. It just seems too, I don't know. I just don't.
Formulated?
Yeah, it just feels uninspired. But if I think of like the old Tiesto, like Traffic, those things, and if I think of, even the sort of commercial dance from the 90s, where he had that like 90s dance piano and stuff.
Yeah.
So where am I going with this? I actually bought a Korg M1. Don't tell Simon Forsyth, the quadrasynth guy. Joking.
Yeah.
He doesn't like the quadrasynth. But this is the joke because you guys are familiar with the Korg M1, yeah?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we don't want to turn this into a geek talk show, but I downloaded, there's a Korg Do a plugin version of that. And I just thought, well, let me, because it's funny because I've never heard an M1. I've never seen one. So I downloaded the plugin and I went through and I went, wow, these have got some really nice iconic sounds. And anyway, so I went onto eBay and I bought one because for my 90s series that's coming out, where we talk about, and I'm going to we'll probably do a little bit of a shoehorn with you guys on that series. And it's funny when you turn the Korg M1 on and you flip through the presets, almost every preset is a song you've heard before. And what's quite funny, can you hear that?
Yeah.
It's quite funny. That sound there, go on, Gary Newman fan.
Yeah. What's the song?
Now that exact sound, it's called the David Brooks told me it's called the Beauty preset. It's like a piano and a choir sound. But Gary Newman has taken that straight from the Korg M1. And the funny thing is, I mean, who's the biggest Gary Newman fan here besides me? Probably you, Andy.
Probably.
I'm thinking of, listen to this one.
Yeah.
So I mean, that defines Newman from about, I would say, this Sacrifice album.
Yeah.
Right up, because he was doing it on he was using that sound on every song, and I can see why it's so iconically Newman, but it is a preset. And I believe it was Aid Fenton that actually went, dude, I don't want to hear that fucking sound anymore. It was quite funny. If you listen to I think the last 3 records is not on there, but everything there. But anyway, I'm going to do a video on that.
Oh.
And I think Andy, you'll appreciate this because that is the exact sound. Anyway.
But even though you said Faye said no more, if you listen to the last rounds, he's found something that sounds very similar.
Yeah. If you look at the way Gary Newman structures songs, he really he plays the melody, and the melody's played, and he sings over it. So to be like, what's it?
Yeah.
This is absolution, and he actually sings. And the way he puts his music together, it's very, as David Brooks said, it's very simplistic, but it's just very genius because there's no sort of wasted notes. Every note is important, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, he always creates a lovely atmosphere in his songs, or deep atmosphere, and that even hearing that. When you played it, I was getting goosebumps in the back of my neck because it's such a good sound.
It is, yeah, and the bastard just used the preset.
That's the thing as well. That's the thing. It's like when you go back to, obviously you had the pioneers, the Marauders, the early Kraftwerk, and all of that stuff, and they had synthesizers. And I remember when I first had synthesizers, it used to take me like 45 minutes to set my rig up. And they had these synthesizers, and they never had presets, and they had to find the sounds. And there's even stories of OMD and Kraftwerk with soldering irons, like changing the circuitry to change the sound and stuff. Whereas, like now, there's still great electronic music coming out, but everyone uses Logic. It's in the box. You can go through and just literally go through sounds and sounds and sounds until you find something you like, and it's like, I had that one.
Yeah.
I mean, Stephen Morris come out with a quote that I read the other day. He said that musicians today, there's a paralysis by hyperactivity, which I thought was a really good quote because you're so obsessed with like just finding a sound and going through the libraries and everything. You haven't got the creating element to actually make that sound before you go into put it into your song. Newman using the presets is like, the total opposite of Depeche Mode supposedly never using the presets.
Well, this is interesting because I will, obviously sometimes I'll flip through presets and I'll find something that inspires me, and because I'm a melodically kind of driven person, so I'll find a sound that inspires me, and then what I'll usually do is I will go to something like this, like my Moog or something, and I'll try and reverse. I will find something in that sound, but I'll try and build it from scratch. Every approach is different. It doesn't always work, but people are always asking me, can you use presets? And my answer always is there is no right or wrong way. But I get what you're saying there. There is this kind of reliance these days, because I did a video recently on the drag and drop producer. Where you get these construction kits, and oh my God, there are these adverts that pop up on my YouTube feed all the time. They're like the MIDI pack and the construction drag and drop. And I'm like, no, children, no, it's not how you do it. Listen to Granddad, no. But okay. So anyway, I want to talk about frontmen now in electronic music. Or when I say electronic music, I think you guys are a bit like me. I don't like to actually use that because a lot of what constitutes an electronic band. Like on my channel, we talk about Duran Duran, and they're not an electronic band, but there is Nick Rhodes.
Elements of it.
Yeah, synth pop rock band, aren't they?
You guys know what I'm talking about. So
yes, I know what you're talking about.
Within this situation of artists that we like, who would you say, we'll start with you, Andy, frontmen of these types of bands that really jump out at you? Give me five. Give me five.
I'd say Dave Sylvian, because David Sylvian from Japan.
Yeah.
Just because he was so classy, stylish, great voice. Obviously ripped off Brian Ferry. Brian Ferry's the second one I put in there, funny enough. I just think he the whole Roxy music, he just stood out so well. Mr. Gahan from Depeche Mode. It's going to be an awkward one for some people, but I'd say Roland and Lazabelle, only because people say, well, what about Kurt Smith? There was two singers, but Lazabelle for me found his voice later on and became one of the most powerful vocalists I've ever seen. And the songs are just... and then I'd say, how many is that, mate? How many have I had? Three?
You had three.
Four. So I'd say final one, and there's loads more, but I'd probably say Mark Hollis from Talk Talk.
Yeah, funny you say that.
His voice sprinkled magic on those songs, and the passion in his voice. Again, we're all... The reason we love music is it ignites a certain reaction in us, and there's certain songs where you just hairs on the back of your neck, or you get really emotional, and most of the talk stuff you listen to, and it's just mind-blowing. A bit like I say about Lazabelle, when I hear some of the songs from Tears for Fears, like Woman in Chains.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very soulful ballad, but when he hits those notes, and wow, you just sit there, your jaws here. And so, yeah, they're the kind of five. There's other people I'd like to add at some point, but obviously give me five, so I'll keep it at that.
It's funny. So, yeah, I'll ask the questions and I'll elaborate. I'll give input on your choices there. I like that you mentioned Roland, because I've always felt that Roland was a bit, I don't want to say underrated, because, they're well known. I can show you some people who are underrated. They're brilliant artists and no one knows about them. But I just think that Roland is not one that would sort of come up in people's top 10 usually. But I really get it. I remember when they released that 1993 album. What's it? The coldest shoulder casting metal, frozen to
bone. Yeah.
Yeah. She was right. Yeah. It's so soulful.
The Elemental album, was it?
Yeah.
So that's my favourite album of theirs, Elemental. Yeah. And Kurt Smith's not on it.
But he was solo. He'd gone solo at that point, didn't he?
Yeah. He did two albums later. Roll the Kings of Spain and Elemental in that song. And I'd love to get Elemental on vinyl. I've tried, but forget it. You just can't get it.
Really?
He's actually got a solo album outside of Tears for Fears as well.
All right.
Called Screaming Dogs or something as well, which is a really good album.
Okay,
he's a great vocalist.
While we've got you, sir, tell us your top five.
I was jotting them down while Andy was talking, and I wrote David Sylvian, Dave Gahan, Mark Hollis, Roland Orzabal, but I think Alison Moyet and Annie Lennox from that period, Eurythmics and Yazoo, especially Alison Moyet on top of Vince Clarke's keyboards was just brilliant. As a brilliant flash of time. Midure, John Fox, Mark Almond was good for Soft Cell. At the time, Tony Hadley and Simon Le Bon were kind of like two vocalists, but I think that they're not two styles that I'm massive fans of these days, but they were quite different at the time.
I'd say one to add, and sorry mate if we're going a bit off pat, but it's David Byrne as well for me from Talking Heads. And I'd say I saw him live at the O2, and I told Mark, we've been to thousands of concerts, like literally, that was the best concert I've ever been to, was David Byrne at the O2. Honestly, just mind-blowing how good that guy was.
Wow.
Only some nothing, even though...
Check the video out, mate, on YouTube with him live. It's really simple. Simple.
I will, obviously, I will get some links from you guys afterwards.
Yeah.
Lloyd, what's your five?
Well, I was writing it down like Mark was, but Gahan, because of his energy, the way he gets the crowd in his palm of his hands, he really brings life to on that stage where because the other guys are just on their simps, and if Gahan wasn't there, I think the show would be quite boring without him. I know it sounds a bit harsh, but
no, you're right.
That's what I believe. Ralph Hutter from Kraftwerk, because he's not human. He's a robot on stage. He's human, and that's what I like about it. He's robotic. And then you got Mark Ullman, who Mark already said, very flamboyant but very entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mark already said mid-jaw.
Yeah.
You can go from like synth to vocals to guitar He's very good. He can be baritone. He can be falsetto.
Yeah.
He's very good at switching up.
Yeah.
And then I thought to be a more original, Jimmy Somerville from Bronski Beat and Communards.
Yeah.
You know, he's very flamboyant, energetic, good falsetto lungs.
Yeah, amazing.
Very underrated, I think, in some ways. But I've seen him live at a festival, and I thought he was amazing. But yeah, he's I don't think Jimmy Somerville or Bronski Beat really get mentioned as much in the electronic scene.
They don't.
But
I've always heard them highly.
Good shout. Very good shout. I had all their albums. And,
A Small Town Boy is a great song.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
absolute classic. No, it's a good shout, mate.
Well, thank you.
So, talking about people who don't sort of get shout outs and stuff, Mark Hollis is definitely one whose voice just really stands out. He's got this really tender way of singing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to demonstrate it now. I'm going to do a video about that one day where I just explain, how he uses his voice. It's kind of like a head voice. It is a head voice, but it almost sounds like he's constrict. This makes no sense, but it makes sense to me. It's like to make that kind of sound, it's like you need to constrict your throat, but open it up at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He's got the bloody hour. It's kind of, but it's a very tender, vulnerable sound. And I just always thought that Talk were, if we were going to say underrated. And once again, I don't want to cause division here, but I know if I think about the 80s and stuff, people always talk about like, commercially speaking, they'll talk about Boy George and, Mark Almond's name was up there as well. But I'm always the one kind of gunning for, what about Mark Hollis? And, because they, to me, because I'm more of a moody kind of guy, I like my moody music.
Yeah.
Because, their debut album started off very synthy. They was on EMI, had the same producer as Duran Duran, Colin Thurston, and they were kind of like very Duran-like. But then every album subsequently just got more sparse and sparse and sparse until, Laughing Stock right at the end. It's just all ambience and his voice.
It makes a bit like Sylvian with Japan, though, isn't it, as well? They became this sort of synth band and very atmospheric to this kind of very, almost like jazz-like artist, Sylvian, his last sort of few albums. Really
those guys you mentioned, like Sylvian and Hollis, you can tell gradually in late in their careers they were trying to be a bit more experimental, which is not a bad thing really, because a lot of artists they also try to get more commercial because that's obviously an easy way to get success. But I like those artists to go like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I want because it makes me happy.
I'm with you on that. It's interesting because I mentioned Brian Ferry's a great frontman, but actually the early stuff with Eno was so groundbreaking. But then, with the greatest respect, and when they did Avalon, everything he did after that was like Avalon Part 1, 2, 3, and 4 because it was just commercially more successful, sadly. So I kind of get, okay, he's got to earn a living, but he almost lost his creativity by doing that. Whereas you say Hollis or Sylvian, I think their credibility went through the roof by doing what they did.
Yeah. I would like to see more artists do that, really, because I think too many artists. I like, for example, I know we were going a bit off topic here, but like someone like U2, for example, they get into a formula and they rather keep that formula, where like suppose early in their career, like in the 80s, they were a bit more innovative, a bit more experimental. But I think once they hit that benchmark with Joshua Tree, I think it's more like let's just keep going as commercial as possible, really. I mean, don't get me wrong, Acton Baby was innovative and electronic, but there was still a sense of anthemic choruses and all that.
No, I think it's a fair point, mate. Fair point. But I do like those guys that carry. That's why I like someone like David Byrne. He's 68 and he's still making stuff that just makes you stop and listen. And he's incredibly clever. And Damon Albarn, you look at him. Though you probably wouldn't put him in that electronic. He does some stuff he does with Gorillaz. He's written Chinese operas. He's I watched the Gorillaz once, and on stage you've got the frontman from Blur, half of De La Soul, and half of the Clash. And you're like, only he could make that work, right? Really clever. And he's still bringing out stuff at a rate of knots, and it's all quite cool.
He also experiments with different genres as well, Gorillaz as well, like hip hop, rock, indie.
100%. Yeah, and I love people like that just keep trying to push the envelope. They don't, as you said, they don't get into that rut of, well, this is making me money, so I'm just going to keep bringing this stuff out. Because I think some people start twigging that actually you're not being that new or fresh, so it gets a bit. Every time I hear Damon Albarn's doing something new, or David Byrne, or Jonzi from Siggy Rose, it's going to be something a bit different.
Yeah.
It's also like Brian Eno as well. I mean, Brian Eno, as talking electronic music, Brian Eno's been involved with U2 on a Joshua Tree. He was in Roxy Music. Yeah. He's produced his own solo electronic stuff. I mean, Brian Eno has touched a lot of stuff within electronic music and just put his kind of trademark layers of ambience and sounds on it. I mean, all the string sounds on the Joshua Tree, I think, are down to Eno, really.
Yeah, but he's even been diverse. I think he works on some of the Massive Attack stuff. He's incredibly eclectic.
Right, guys, let's turn our attention to the producers now of, the same genres we've been talking at. Now, obviously, we're thinking the names that jump out. I'm thinking Nile Rodgers, for more commercial stuff. Dave Stewart from Eurythmics.
Yeah.
Morodo, not to forget, Trevor Horn. So I'm going to be generous again. I'm going to start with Lloyd this time. Lloyd, 5 names of, let's say, iconic producers from that.
I can name some, but 5. Wow, you're right. Well, I'll start with one. I can definitely think of a few, but I'll start with one. Like Connie Plank. Yeah. His stuff he did with Ultravox. Vienna. Rage and Eden. We'll forget Uvox, but those 2 albums were amazing. What I like about Connie Plank, especially those albums, and he's admitted it in a documentary, that he's not too technical. He's all about the vibe.
Yeah.
And when you listen to like Vienna, for example, there's definitely a good vibe there. I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, there's good aspects of electronic music there, but you can definitely hear that kind of like in terms of like, I mean, vibe. When songs are upbeat, it's upbeat. When it's on downbeat, it's on the downbeat. And when it's atmospheric, it's atmospheric. Yeah. So Connie Plank will come into mind. I'm not just saying this because we're having a Zoom meeting with him, but Gareth Jones, he's another brilliant one. The Berlin Trilogy, Metamatic with John Fox. Yeah. He's a great producer and engineer. He's very experimental as well. I'm probably go for another theme here as well. Flood, he's another another good one. With Erasure, Depeche Mode. Yeah. Obviously, he's another good one as well. That's 3, isn't it? Mid-Jaw, he's a good producer in his own right. Band-Aid. I think, was it Peter Goodwin? He's worked with. I'm very sure he. It's said on the Lamette album it was Ultravox. I'm very sure it's mostly Mid-Jaw who did most of the production on that, because I think Ultravox took the reins of production on that. I'm trying to think what else he's done production wise. Mid-Jaw is another good one. So that's 4. 5. That's really challenging. This is Vaughn.
Dave Stewart from Eurythmics is one that jumps up there that doesn't get mentioned a lot. That's why I'm just throwing it in. It's an unfair question, guys, because it's not a competition. It's really just discuss. I think I should rephrase the question, not who's your favorite 5, but just mention 5 that jump to the top of your mind. That's really what. Yeah. And then then what I'll do is I think same question to you, Mark, but if it can be. Even if you agree with Lloyd, mention 5 different ones. I think that'll be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think Lloyd probably covered it pretty well, really. I mean, I wrote Connie Plank, Colin Thurston, Brian Eno, Dave Stewart, Flood, Gareth Jones, Trevor Horn, Steve Levine, who worked with Trevor Horn the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the ones that jump out to me. They're from the iconic albums that I loved at the time. I don't know who produced like the early Newman stuff and the early OMD stuff. I don't know, but I think it's interesting that the Sweet Dreams album by Eurythmics, that is 8 tracks. The whole album is 8 tracks. Now that still sounds really fat, really well produced, and that's like 8 tracks. It's like I mean, I used to have an 8-track recorder, and like it didn't sound anything like that. and now at our disposal, you've got infinite number of tracks, and it still doesn't sound anything like that. So, I mean, what he created on an 8-track recorder is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, there are myths to that theory. And I don't know. These are just rumors and hearsay. But if we talking about small track amounts, Nile Rodgers was very much, he did that when he did Madonna's Like a Virgin. I think he did that on an 8-track as well. There's just like one double up on the chorus, and because he wanted to pay homage to like the Motown. Nile Rodgers said it worked then, it'll work now. So I think the guys then were very good at limiting themselves. But on the subject of tracks, Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax, which is a video I think I should do, which is a song I should do a video on, and probably get you, collaborate with the Electronic Cafe.
Yeah.
Relax was that was groundbreaking at the time. You can actually hear Depeche Mode's Master and Servant. They were kind of going for that kind of huge, epic kind of sound. And of course, Alan Wilder. Sorry, Alan Wilder. Alan Wilder did say that he felt they got close but didn't quite get there. But apparently Frankie's Relax was done on 24 tracks. Now, some of the rumors I've heard were saying it wasn't really because there were bouncers and stuff as well. I don't know. But can we actually just agree now, Electronic Cafe, when I talk about that song, because that song's probably going to take a couple of videos to cover. We'll shoehorn you guys, we will invite you guys into an episode of that to talk about.
You'll Trevor Horner. You'll Trevor
Trevor Horner. Thank you very much. We're here all week. Andy, do you want to add to the list of producers?
Yeah, I mean, the guys have covered a lot. I was going to cut, so Connie Plank, totally. Trevor Horn, yeah, I mean, the stuff he did with ABC, Frankie, I mean, he just added another dimension to their music. Martin Hannett, which Lloyd mentioned for the Joy Division stuff, still two of the greatest albums I've ever listened to. Tony Visconti for the stuff he did with Bowie.
Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah.
Good one.
Amazing work. And actually, when you watch his documentaries, all the sounds, how he engineered it, genius. Flood, I put. And then the other one was our friend Rusty.
Yeah.
Listen to what he's done with Welcome to the Dance Floor, Welcome to the Remix Volume 2, where he's got all these artists.
Yeah.
And also know he's working on some cool stuff. There's a documentary coming out. This is a little plug for him. I think January on Sky Arts called Blitzed. So it's about the whole impact the Blitz Club had on that whole scene. Yeah. I think he's writing a soundtrack to it. And again, I think he's done a track with Boy George. He's doing one with Dieter Meyer from Yellow. So he's still making great stuff. But that Welcome to Remix Volume 2 album, if you listen to it, there's like 40 tracks with all these different artists, and they're all brilliant tracks. So he's quite underrated, I think, from a producer standpoint as well.
Well, as he called himself, he said, "I'm the Invisible Man." He said he's the Invisible Man. Yeah? He did. He's kind of like, if you look at, he had influence in so many people's careers.
Yes.
And a lot of people he influenced and helped them.
Yeah.
And he's not credited for it. So.
No, you're right, mate. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And so yeah, he's producing good stuff. But yeah, and as I say, Visconti is right up there for me. So I added a couple more, but they're very similar.
That's fine. Gareth has got a very interesting way of asking it. I asked him one of these, and he is just, honestly, every interview we've seen with Gareth so far has been, about music and stuff. But something that I think my interviews have brought to light is the fact that Gareth's an incredibly deeply emotionally switched on spiritual kind of person. And that was something I was I've never seen that on any of his other interviews. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm just saying, in other interviews, it was always about the subjects, but the interviews I've got him on now, we do, it does become quite philosophical sometimes. What I like about Gareth is he's got this tremendous sort of like intuitive philosophy that he brings into his work and into the mixing environment, which I haven't found from a lot of, of course I haven't met everyone on that level, but with him, it's not all about the technicalities. It's very, very spiritual in a way. It's like guru-ish, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. But when you listen to his solo album, was it electromagnetic? Is that
electrogenetic?
electrogenetic. I mean, the production on that is just a different level.
Oh, it's
I mean,
stupidly good.
it's so sparse in places, and there's just little things going on. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, and of course, and the sad thing is as well that a record like that, it just goes over most people's heads. And you know what I mean? I'm not trying to sound like an idiot when I say that, but it does remind me. I've used this saying a lot on my channel. I had an art teacher in school, Mrs. Byrne, and she always said to me, Vaughn, if you want to appeal to the man in the street, you need to lower your standards. And that is very true when we look at, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but the mainstream music, if you were to play like Gareth's record to most people, a lot of people will just be like, oh, where's the beat? But and that is why I believe it is an acquired taste, but it's, I find the people that really get that kind of music, like everyone on this chat here, it's awesome. It's bloody awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you were saying just now about appealing to the masses, about lowering your standards. Well, I don't want to get into too much into it, but shows like the X Factor are the perfect example of that, really.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, talking about because I'm very outspoken by the fact, or very guilty of the fact that I don't sort of pay much attention to what's really commercial and stuff, and I should, because let's just face it, there are some great things out there. It's just that we're all in our own little world. But we'll start with you, Andy.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I should be listening to that you'd like to bring to the attention of people that's...
Oh, God, don't start me off, mate. I would say if you haven't checked out Working Men's Club.
Okay, Working Men's Club, yeah.
Check those guys out. I think they're one of the few bands that I've fallen in love with that actually got on the Jules Holland show, getting amazing reviews. They're a bit like the Fall meets New Order. Just incredible track. I would say check out, those are definitely a band worth checking out. Do you know Phono Head?
Phono Head? Yes, I do, yes.
Yeah, so he's a guy who's based in St. Petersburg. He did one album, he's done a couple of mini albums, but we've got a few of these guys coming on our show actually, mate, because we talked about this platform to give these artists. So next year we're going to be interviewing, hopefully, Phono Head. A guy called Valderhaus. He's a German guy based out in Wales, I think. And there's a guy called Atlas, Atlas. I've been speaking to his management because I just, when you hear an album, you just go, wow, where the fuck has this come from? And it's just awesome. And their management talked to us, and we're going to be interviewing them last week in January. So there's some, there's so many other good bands out there.
That's fine.
I know Rusty's talked about Julia Bondar. He's got a big thing where he thinks she's great. I'd say there's Jennifer Touch as well, if you don't know her. Berlin-based DJ stroke artist, amazing girl, writes some great music. There's a few bands that I would say definitely worth, that are right in my head right now that I play a lot.
Mark?
I mean, I agree with those ones that Andy said. I mean, there's a new band called Private World from Wales.
Yes.
Which are really good, which is kind of like China Crisis, Roxy music kind of sounding. You'd think it was from the 80s. Nation of Language.
Say it again.
That's a really good Nation of Language.
Okay.
I mean, they've got an album out which is kind of, you can hear New Order, Cure, Depeche Mode in their stuff. I mean, that's a really good one to check out. I really like Alessandro Cortini, who also goes under the name of Sono EO, who's worked with Alan Wilder anyway, so put a siren on.
We'll do that in post-production, shall we?
But he's the keyboard player for Nine Inch Nails, but he's done some solo albums under his own name and under Sono EO. He's classically trained guitarist, but he's chosen to play the keyboards. And the stuff that he does with his electronics is very, I mean, it's just brilliant. It's got a darkness to it. Very sort of Newman or Alan Wilder recoily kind of sounding stuff. I mean, I really like Mesh. I remember I introduced you to Mesh.
You did, yes.
And then you jumped in the bus and when I saw him, so I was a bit upset about that.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. That's right. You introduced me to their music. Is that right?
That's right. I've just said in the early days. I just said
because
I said, if you like Depeche Mode, you'll like these.
Yeah, because that's right. Because Mark is kind of like my. I always call him my educator. He's like, you should listen to this, and then a day later it shows up on vinyl in my post box. So I'm actually, I want to pull one out here. Yeah, because you sent me. Anyway, I'll get onto that now. But you introduced me to Mesh, and then it was Richard Silverthorne reached out to me. Funny because you played me that song "My Protector," and then Rich just reached out to me and he said, would I like to, they'd like to do an interview, and then I thought, oh yeah, where did I hear that? So yeah, it was you introduced me. Yeah, you also introduced me to Wolfgang Richman Wunderbar. Yeah. And he's very much the blue hair and the white face. It really reminds me of the Gary Newman sort of.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, while we're on the vinyls, you sent me the very first was the Ultravox.
Oh, 3 into 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here it is.
Great album.
Thank you for that, mate. But this, I was surprised because this is very punkish. There's not much synthesizer on here.
Yeah, that's a compilation of their 3 albums. I think the first side is kind of their early stuff, but then the second side has got Slow Motion and Hiroshima Monomoro, which has got a lot more electronics in there. Yeah, but sure. Apart from John Fox, that's the same Ultravox that Midure fronted. So it's you kind of see the evolution of the band through that album.
It's so different, actually.
Anyway, here's a question. I mean, Ultravox is a band that I feel I should know more about, so thank you for this. Why did John Fox leave Ultravox? And I know Gary Newman is a big fan of Ultravox, but he always says, I was a big fan of John Fox Ultravox.
Yeah.
Why did John leave? Was it a fallout or?
I think it was with Billy Currie. He had a falling out with Billy Currie, I think.
All right.
And I think when they got dropped by Island Records, he had no reason to continue, I think. But probably Mark and Andy will probably explain more.
I think that's it. I mean, he did his first solo album, the Metamatic album, is another one you should check out.
Yeah.
If you
is that Underpass? Underpass.
Yes.
Yeah. No One Driving, and it's a great album. And again, it was Rusty that got Midge into the old Ultravox. So I mean, again, very influential.
Yeah, so Rusty's always been there sort of in the background, like orchestrating, introducing people to things. They subliminally pick up on it. They release something. Boy, it all comes back to Rusty.
Yeah, I think there was an ongoing tension as well, mate, in terms of commercially. The first Ultravox which you've got there was nowhere near as successful as when Midge came in. And that created a lot of pressure on them. And again, as Lloyd says, and Mark, with that Billy Currie Fox dynamic, it just didn't work out, sadly. But I'm probably going to cause some controversy. I actually prefer the Fox Ultravox because it's just so much more experimental and quite groundbreaking, which is why Newman has so much in all of them. I'm not saying the Midge did an amazing job and they're an amazing band, but for me, there's just that quirkiness of the early Ultravox stuff I just prefer. That's just my taste,
Yeah, that's fine. It's cool.
That's fine. It's all about taste, and we digress conversational, but Lloyd, who does a great job. I want to thank you personally again, Lloyd, for the work you do on the Vaughn George Facebook group. Guys, you will. I don't know how many people you've got on yours yet, but as it gets bigger, I've obviously had people who've been on there since the beginning, and some people are quite precious, like this is our group, and as it grows, there's sometimes a bit of teething because some of the new members, need to kind of understand how we roll. But Lloyd had to diffuse a little bit of drama there this morning. It doesn't happen often. Don't worry, the drama's coming to you guys soon as you expand. It doesn't happen often, but the point I'm trying to make is that we have in our group, people who are, all ages. Got some teenagers, but there are people in their 50s and 60s. And something I've realized is that people never grow up, because some people just get so passionate and it really becomes dramatic sometimes. Yeah, so people just get really passionate about it, and something my group's been very good. And I think there's going to be a spillover. I think a lot of my, I'd say the group members of VG and Electronic Cafe, there'll be a crossover. And it's quite nice. It's a like-minded, intelligent, informed kind of person, not snobbish, but a decent person. And, usually, you know, I've seen other groups where people really kick off, but in our group, and in the group indeed, it's not like that. But every now and then, you know, Lloyd will have to step in and do something, but it's only because people are so passionate about it. You know what I mean? But I think within that, I think you can be really passionate, but once you start calling someone a dick, then I think,
yeah.
Well, there's no real right or wrong, is there, with music? I mean, I don't think anyone could be more passionate about music than us. But I mean, if someone disagrees with me, it's just like, okay, you know, yeah, dare I say it, it's like religion or something. You won't be able to change someone's mind if they're absolutely fixed on a belief. So,
correct.
You know, I'm sure we'll start to get it more and more. I mean, and also people mention in our group that they refer to your group, and I think I've seen a couple of times that the other way around, people in your group have mentioned stuff that
there's a nice crossover already. Actually, I think you're right. There's a nice, because as you say, Vaughn, they're like-minded people. I mean, you know, some of the shows we've done on YouTube, we've had. I mean, the wilder ones like 9,000 views. but and out of the 30, 50 comments, you're always going to get one or two idiots, and you just think, well, you know, I'd love to say something back, but there's no point.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
But you're right, mate. I guess as you got bigger, that gets volumized just because of the sheer scale. So the odds are against you, it going the other way. So, you know,
So Lloyd, you've got your hands full. As I say, sometimes there are large days that I don't jump in there. But Lloyd is really, I feel he's got my back there. And you know, we've also got Ash, we've got Marshall, and we've got Simon, who's, you know, occasionally on there as well.
Yeah.
But Lloyd, tell us what's been the biggest challenge and the best part and the worst part.
Well, okay, I'll start with the positives. Yeah. When you start engaging about Vaughn's posts, like, did you like this? I thought it was great, and people can elaborate on that. Or if someone discovers some new electronic music, that's quite engaging as well. And but the only thing the only negatives I do not like is when someone posts something and they say, "Oh, I don't like this Depeche Mode song or album." And then you get a few bad apples who just, you know, they lynch on that person and go, "How dare you do this?" And sometimes every now and again I have to intervene. It's either I mute those people or delete the posts. Yeah. Because sometimes it just gets out of control.
Yeah. You're playing like referee, aren't you?
But I do think, guys, the sort of Facebook, using Facebook as a, you know, sort of as a forum to the YouTube channel is a very, very good way to do it. And I do think we're going to do a lot more collaborations in future. I think it'll be.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm on with Espen Kraft next week.
You've spoken to him before, haven't you?
Yeah. No, we're going to do another one. I'm going to do my impersonation to him. Hi, I'm Espen Kraft, and I am an atheist.
That's very, very good, mate.
I'm going to do a video one day where I impersonate all my guests. You guys are next.
I'll get the rubber wig, mate.
No, that's great. And guys, okay, so I'm going to we're going on to 68 minutes now. That's fine. So I want you guys to we'll start with you, Andy. Throw out a question to the group, or something you'd like to discuss, or anything you'd like to say.
Wow. So. God, that's a really tough one question.
I've got one. I'll help you out, Andy, if you buy anything.
You see, it's nice. So you guys are two to help each other out. It's not fair, is it?
Yeah. We're just like Ant and Dec, you remember?
You're never going to live that one down, are you? Yeah, you should tag Ant and Dec in your YouTube videos. It might bring more people to your channel.
You should don't do that. Ant and Dec's cafe.
Don't do that. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead, mate.
Okay. We've all got our preferences on electronic music, and I guess we don't know all the aspects of electronic music. There's certain bits that I know, and I know about it passionately and in depth. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know about. But for me, electronic music changed in about 83, 84, where it went from that early stage of analog sound in Japan, Ultravox, you know, that. When it became digital with the DX7, it became, the sound of electronic music became a lot more dancey, and for me, I kind of lost interest a little bit in
less creative
84 onwards.
Yeah, almost.
So my question is, do people have a sweet spot for their electronic music? Is there a period, like, do they like up to say 84, which is like my real sweet spot? When it went totally digital, it just seemed a little bit cold and a little bit, you know, too dancey and a bit, you know. If you watch those reruns of Top of the Pops in the late 80s, there's hardly anything on there in the charts that I really, really liked. Yeah. And then now, I guess music's going back to, you've got the hybrid synthesizers, which are digital, but got the analog sounding stuff, and
that's right, yeah.
It's becoming warmer again.
That's a very good question, yeah.
So for me, I kind of very late 70s to early 80s, 83, 84 maybe. But when it became too harsh, too digital, this is probably going to be a bit controversial. I was a massive Duran Duran fan. Nick Rhodes was like the reason I bought a synthesizer, much to my dad's disgust of me buying a synthesizer, because like I don't think there's no one musical at all in my family. It's embarrassing. I think the Milkman was musical though, so I might have something to do with it. But Nick Rhodes was the reason I bought a synthesizer, and I loved Duran Duran. They were the band I saw the most during the early part of the 80s. But when it became like Seven and the Ragged Tiger, it then became very Fairlight, very electronic sort of synthesizers. I kind of that sound didn't mean as much to me as like the early part.
Yes, it's almost less authentic. Almost, yeah. You know what I think? I think I can come in here. It's almost with the advent of the DX7, the D50, and the M1, with the advent of the preset. You know, where you bought things that had presets. There's the sounds. It sparked a different type of creativity.
Yeah, you had to find the sounds. I mean, I got rid of all my first wave of synthesizers when digital came out, and I got rid of SH101 Roland, which I've just rebought actually, but I got rid of the Juno 6 and that, which you literally couldn't give them away when the DX7 came out and digital stuff came out. Whereas like now they just go for thousands of pounds again if you wanted to rebuy
It's like
them.
vinyl. When CDs came out, everyone got rid of their vinyl collections, and now we're all collecting vinyl again.
Exactly. So for me, there's a sweet spot. It's probably late 70s to 83, 84. That's the period that I probably know like the back of my hand and the music I love. But for me, and my question is did people like that period and fall out of love in it in the late 80s, or was it the other way around?
I think you've raised a very good question, yeah, and I love this flowing, yeah. It's awesome. I do think you're right, because obviously, you know, synthesizers started off as a very avant-garde, underground, this is not real music kind of thing. It was always having to prove itself. You got the snobbish rock and roll media who were very against it. And then it started to become more accepted. But I really think there is a correlation between that period where you kind of went off it, where the sort of like the DX7s and the, you know, that was like the rise of the preset age. I think that is the kind of time when those, I'm not blaming those keyboards, but it was like the digital thing where it's like more people are doing it, and it became more about the hit and less about the avant-garde. And that's the way I see it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm very similar to Mark in terms of sweet spot, like late 70s, you know, you showed that Ultravox album, Vaughn, and then Kraftwerk were coming to the fore, and O&D, Newman, the early Human League stuff before the girls joined, Visage, Tears for Fears. So, I mean, all those bands came up to about 83. So my sweet spot, I guess, is there, but there are little bits. So even in the early 2000s, when LCD sound system started using analog synths again, and kind of that reignited those little. So I guess there's a cluster of love in that sort of late 70s, early 80s bit, and there's little bits of stuff that blips from then to now where I go, actually, in that year, these guys came up. And I say, use LCD as an example, or maybe a David Byrne album. The album he did with St. Vincent was very creative. It was just synth, bass, and brass. You know, there's just little blips of stuff that you go, it's coming back. But I don't think it'll ever have the fire of that Joy Division, Simple Minds, you know, late 70s, early 80s fire that is still coming through in certain bands. But yeah, that was just, for me, the moment. That was the moment, those sort of 5 years from sort of 77 or 6 years to 83, where it all changed. And it still resonates now.
That's a very good question, Mark. It really is a great question.
Yeah.
It's really kind of, it's one of those kind of like, I don't want to say mind blowing, but it is really like it's like an epiphany, like, wow. Yeah. Because it's that 84, 85 where it's gone from sort of experimental, almost more poppy and dancey.
Yeah.
You had that. You touched on it earlier. You had that kind of black boxy ding, 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 ding. That piano sound through most of the songs.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair, Andy, we're probably guilty. We had a couple of songs with that piano sound in there. But I mean, if you got a DX7, what else can you do? You got 50 banks of ding, ding, ding.
You just went to the shops thinking I get a bag of ding, 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 please. But yeah, I mean, look, there was some great club tracks like Voodoo Ray, I Love, Guy Called Gerald, and that sort of stuff. But if you look at that period, there wasn't a Sons and Fascinations or a Metamatic or a Telecom coming out in that kind of period. So yeah, for me, that's, as you look through, I just look at that as the fire for me. So yeah, it's a good question, mate.
Good.
Yeah,
Lloyd, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, well, I think I kind of agree with Mark and Andy really, because I you know, like the late 70s to was it the Carve Point? Is it 84 we're talking about here?
83.
I think the DX7 came out in 83, so probably
it was about that DX7 thing.
So it's about 84 onwards. But you know, I mean, sorry to interrupt, Lloyd, but I mean, if you listen to the Quiet Life by Japan or New Gold Dream by Simple Minds, and that warmth analog and the sequences and stuff would just seem so much nicer than that harsh late 80s electronic music. Sorry, Lloyd, to interrupt, but I mean that was my.
No, that's all right. No, yeah, no, that's all right. Thank you very much. I think what I was trying to elaborate on, and I think what happened was with the you know that kind of period, like it was mostly the independent labels that were trying to innovate electronic music, and the independent labels giving those bands kind of freedom. Now, as it got more popular, it kind of meant, unfortunately, the major labels were catching on, which means they were trying to commercialize that genre. And unfortunately, as a result of that, electronic music, as it got more prolific, the sound kind of lost its experimental edge because the major labels were catching on, unfortunately.
That's very good, Lloyd. That's true.
That's exactly it, I think. But I mean, the same thing happened with punk. The same thing happened with glam. You get the first wave of innovators, and then you get the copiers that come in afterwards. You know, there was some great stuff that come out in the late 80s. I mean, you know, New Order carried on doing great stuff. I mean,
Spirit of Eden was like Spirit of Eden was like 80s, right?
Yeah, Talk did some great stuff, and you know, for me, I think that those albums have dated more than albums that were recorded before it.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, for example, from Duran Duran, has dated far more than Rio album or the Duran Duran album or the Japan Quiet Life album, Polaroids album, Simple Minds albums. Just because if you're using the latest technology, it tends to date rather than if you find a sound.
I made a comment the other day. There was someone did a post about Sound and Vision being 40, 45 years old from Bowie, and I said, but class never dates.
Yeah. Well, I like that.
You know, it just doesn't.
But you know, it's interesting, guys, because once again, I think you've opened a can of worms with that very, very, very thoughtful question. That, you know, you say your periods from like 70s to 83, and then we talk about where the sort of the DX7 started. But if I'm just thinking of synthesizers now, because I'm looking at this M1 in front of me, well, Vaughn is so retro now. It's for a reason. I'm not going, it's for a reason. I'm looking at that now. That M1 was really, if you look at like synthesizers, when they came out, they were all knob. It had a knob for every function.
Yeah.
Then if you look at like, especially by the time we got to the M1, you had a very Spartan, a very clean workspace, and it was a nightmare because if you wanted to function, you have to go shift key. You had all these menus, it was like menu diving. And then, of course, I know by the time, I think it was the JD 800, where they really sort of brought back that hands-on control. Now, where am I going with this? If we look at synthesizers now, they've all gone back to this. This over here is a Moog, a little fatty, but it's a monophonic hybrid synthesizer. So as Mark said earlier, it's it's analog circuitry with digital control, so the best of both worlds. But it is essentially, this machine is it's a modern machine. It's closer to what they had in the early 80s, whereas this M1 is right in the middle of that period that Mark said we don't really like it. So it's an interesting correlation where not only the music changed, but the technology relating to that period. And interesting how synthesizers started looking the way they did, and the modern synthesizers now look exactly the way they did. And that is why we feel the resurgence of that sound coming. And it's once again why we got rid of our vinyl collections to get CD, and we're going back to vinyl.
Yeah, exactly, mate. And it's quite sweet when Mark and I went to record store day when we could to Rough Trade, and there's all these young kids actually queuing up to buy vinyl as well. I thought it's quite nice to see the younger people picking back up, what I think is the only way to have music. I can't remember who made the quote. Someone said it. I think Mark knows. Yeah, you don't truly own an album until you own it on vinyl, and I agree.
One of the best sayings. You'll hear this on my interview with Gareth. He's got a friend, and I forget who to give credit to, but this friend of his said that vinyl is probably one of the most inconvenient ways to listen to me. As far as it's not flawless. There's crackle, there's hiss, there's all kinds of things. However, it is a beautiful way to consume music.
Yeah. And I actually think it's the emotional connection, mate, where you can look at the artwork, you can read who contributed to it, and you actually have a bit more of an emotional attachment, whereas you download an MP3 file, it's compressed to crap, and you don't really care. There's no emotional connection like what you've got right now.
But can I demonstrate? This is what everyone does, right? This is not just me because I've got a sniffing fetish. I do. I smell everything. And something? Guys, come on. There's nothing like, to the younger ones out there, you go to a record shop, you flip through, you pick this up, you go, you pick it up, and you go, when you get home, you know what I mean? It's hands on, and you feel it, and it's like it's real. It's not in the box. Am I becoming weird here? But
no, you're not. It's a proper emotional connection.
I read a good quote from John Taylor from Duran Duran, and he said, when you play an album, you're making a commitment to listen to an album. He said, like, you get the album out, you get a coffee, you sit down, and you're going to play the album, flip it over, and you're going to listen to that artist's body of work from that period of time. I'll probably sound really old now by saying this, but rather than having an iPod and you got it on shuffle and you play a couple of songs here and flit around here, to get an album out, you're making a commitment to listen to that album from start to finish and just take it all in.
But you're absolutely right, Mark. But every album, and we're from the time that we understand when an artist releases an album, this is why track listing, and this is something we can talk on a separate subject, is that track listing is such an important part of vinyls. And as I say, Violator, Depeche Mode's Violator, just jumps to mind. Now, that is a brilliant body of work. Now, we can do this as an experiment one day. We can listen to Violator with the songs all in different play order. You know something? It will take that album from the level of genius a step down, because the reason, what I'm trying to point out is that the artists do, not so much these days, I don't know, but because that, the emphasis is singles, but you're telling a story. It's that journey. And this is why, when an artist releases an album, it's, it's that journey. And as you say, Mark, when you've got something on the turntable, you're listening to that. It's not like skip. Oh, let's have this. Oh, let's have this. You know, there's just no. I'm also sounding old now, so.
No, mate, I agree. They're an artist, but you know, you can say it's funny. You make a point. Most people just want to hear a single. It's like, well, you wouldn't buy a book and read one chapter, right?
That is a brilliant. That's going on your tombstone.
But it's true, right? It's
brilliant saying, and yeah, that's brilliant.
I get really frustrated with my daughter. You know, she'll hear 5 seconds of a track and go, "That's shit." And well, you've not even listened to it. I said, well, so when you're having a bottle of wine, do you not let it breathe and let it, you know? It's just bizarre. I guess maybe it's just a different approach. Some people just want an instant fix of something they love, whereas I like to hear something that grows on me. Like, you know, when Spirit of Eden first came out and the press were going, "It's amazing." I said it on our show. I really struggled because I was so used to their synthy sort of big sound, but you know, after playing it 3 or 4 times, it's probably the album I played more in a year than any other album.
I agree with you, Andy, because I don't understand people who judge a song by the first few bars. I'm like, you haven't even let it develop yet.
Exactly. Yeah, mate, it does frustrate me because you know, I think sometimes you've got to be a bit patient and dive in. So now we've got my tombstone quote done anyway.
Well, I think I've just come up with a subject for a future video, because we're definitely going to do this again. Just make
lots of it.
And you could possibly, you could even, if you want to get me onto as a guest onto your channel, we can do like a spillover thing.
Yeah, mate, love to.
Look at me gate crashing here. I had it because my brain is starting to fire up now. I'm getting really excited now. Just as we're going to have to kind of end this now, because we're going into like over 90 minutes now. So leave it on a high, guys. Anyway, what were we talking about before that? Just before I come back to that.
One question you wanted to ask each other, and Mark came up with, what was your favourite period of music?
Oh yeah, no. Oh yes, no. This is the. Yeah. By the way, Mark, that was a mother of a question. That's a great question. And here's a question for one of our future videos. And here's a question. It's an interesting question. And that question is, what is a music lover? Because you know something, when I listen to guys like Mark and Andy and Lloyd as well, Lloyd has always impressed me with his knowledge on music as well. When I talk to you guys have got very specific and strong opinions on what you like, but you can also back it up. Like, you won't go, "Oh, that's shit." You will, you know what I mean? We're not even going to address people who talk like that. But what I found is, you get these people and you go, "What kind of music do you like?" "Oh, I like a bit of jazz. I like a bit of," I'm like, you are not a music lover. Because I always find that music lovers are usually very specific about what they do and what they don't like. As with you guys, you're very punctual and you can articulate very well as to why you like or dislike something. But that I think that is a good subject. And I think we can end with this question, actually, guys. Do you agree with that? A music lover is, you know, you get these people go, "Oh, I like jazz, I like this." You know, if you like everything, you're not a music lover. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right. Also as well, I always find you can catch those people out. Yeah. Because there's that typical person who goes, I like a bit of anything. Then you try and catch them out. Go, "Do you like classical music?" They go, "No." Then you don't like everything, then, do you?
Or jazz.
Or jazz.
Yeah.
Very simply, I think a music lover is someone who buys their music.
Yeah.
If you stream it or Spotify or you flit around, like if you really like some music and you commit and you buy that music in some form or another, rather than just streaming it. If you stream it, you don't really own it, do you?
If you're renting it, yeah.
Well, exactly.
Then you're under the kind of stewardship of the algorithm of Spotify that will just want to play you all the crap that no one really wants, or people like us probably don't want to listen to, because it's the stuff that the general population goes, "I like that." And it's a shame, really, because I know it's really, I find it really frustrating when I'll play something and someone in my house, that, you know, one of my daughter's friends will go, "I love this, what's this?" You don't know these guys, no. And then I play stuff. So one of my daughter's friends, I played him the Gorillaz on vinyl the first time. He loved the sound so much. He said, "I feel like I'm going to cry." And then I put some other stuff in. He went, "I don't hear stuff like this in the clubs I go to. Why don't I hear stuff like this in the clubs I go to?" And you think, well, what is blocking that? You know, it's people like you, Vaughn, and Mark, and me, and Lloyd, and like people like Rusty that are trying to get through all that corporate sort of stuff. And I'm not going to slag it because everyone's got their own taste. But when I play that stuff to people that listen to the stuff, we go, well, that's just, you know, X Factor stuff, as Lloyd quite good. They kind of go, oh, I really like that. Sort of, so how do we get them to discover it? And say those platforms that sadly have gone, apart from you, me, Mark, and Rusty, and a few other people, sadly.
Well, I see tremendous power in the future, and it's kind of like, also, we won't get political now, but like, you know, with like mainstream journalism, which is so biased depending on the network. For instance, you would see something happening in the street, and then news broadcaster says this is happening. Another news broadcaster says, no, it's their fault, this is happening. But then you see the independent there sending you video on Twitter to what's really happening. So I think if you can draw a comparison with that, we, the independent,
it's a good analogy.
You know what I mean? We're not global, but we are sort of finding our little place in the world. And, you know, and I think that's what it almost comes back to the old notion of communities, you know, little communities starting. And that's exactly what we've got here. You know, you've got the village of, well, we'll call it, well, I'm not going to call myself a village, and I'm not going to call myself a city. It's the town of Vaughn, George, and the village.
Hamlets of the cafe.
Yeah. It's, but I'm sure with a bit of positive cross-pollination, I think we can help each other.
Love to.
I think on this really positive note, guys, I just want to say this has been, and to the guys watching here, the whole idea with this video was really just to, you know, hook up with Mark and Andy and Lloyd, and just ask some questions and, you know, just flow. There was no real subject, but, you know, off-topic chicken. This is how we roll. Look forward to seeing these gentlemen on a similar chat like this in the future.
Yeah.
And guys, any closing words, Andy?
Mate, listen, I just say thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. You're always welcome on the Electronic Cafe. You know that. You're a good friend of the show, as you are, Lloyd. And I think you're right. Let's try and for me, this is all about introducing more people to all the great music, and that's it. If we can do that, I'll die a happy man.
and we know what to put in your tombstone already, don't we?
Yeah, I said I'll die a happy man.
You wouldn't read one chapter in a book, would you? You won't listen to one song about. Anything you want to say, mate, before we go?
No, I mean, yeah, thanks for doing this. I mean, it's great. It's great to catch up with you guys and really keep up what you're doing. It's like it's a brilliant channel. It's a breath of fresh air, really. Lloyd, all your work you do helping Vaughn and stuff is great, and you're both welcome on Electronic Cafe anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And guys, do you links? Blah, 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 blah.
I'm professional. These newcomers.
Right, guys, and links to everything. Well, a lot of things we've spoken about will be in the description below, guys. You just going to need to send me some links. Check out the Electronic Cafe. They're on YouTube. They're on Facebook. A sister or a brother network now. Guys, I just want to thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Yes, Vaughn. Thanks. Take care.
Cheers, yourselves, yeah?
See you guys.
Lots of love.
See you guys.
Take care, guys. Thank you so much.
All right, there you go. Bye.